Welcome back to another episode of our podcast. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of ResTech Solutions. And today we are talking about modern law practice, why clients value authenticity, trust, and protection more than ever. And I'd like to welcome our guest today, Stephen. So, Stephen, if you'd like to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hey, David. Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I'm Stephen Gaubert. I've been a prosecuting attorney here in Louisiana for 22 years. My practice is primarily focused on personal injury claims, specifically workers' compensation claims for the majority of my career. And I'd say probably over the past 5 years, I've kind of branched out into doing some estate planning and successions. And then specifically over the last 18 months or so, my family law practice has kind of really taken off where yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it, but that's an area that I think authenticity is very much needed.
I know you said you've seen a noticeable shift in what clients are looking for, kind of less formality and more authenticity. So, from your perspective, what's driving that change in today's legal landscape?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a change per se, but I think my experience has been in the family law space. Obviously, I think people are going through very difficult personal moments, whether it be divorce or child custody, child support, you name it. And obviously, they're coming to an attorney because they're looking for a professional and to be able to take this case on and manage it in a way that they're probably incapable of managing it themselves. But I don't think that clients in this realm are necessarily looking for perfection. I think they're looking for another human being who can truly empathize for the predicament that they find themselves in. So it's, basically they're looking for authority, I guess, but also to authenticity, where me being able to say to a client, hey, me too, I was there. I've been through this before. I understand a little bit about what you're experiencing, and here's my experiences, and here's my legal recommendation on how we should move this forward.
But and you mentioned you had more of a focus before on personal injury and workers' comp, and lately it's you kind of been getting more of a transition into the family law. So, what that expansion or change into the different practices, how has that changed the way you run your firm these days, if at all?
How does it change the way I run the firm?
Yes.
I mean, family law is an hourly type of practice, so obviously it's a lot of accounting internally that we have to kind of take a shift from our normal standard practice. But I wouldn't say that it's a wholesale change in terms of how I approach my practice, how I manage my practice. I think it's just again on a personal level, someone going through a family law matter, I want to say requires a little bit more delicate handling, but empathy, I think, more than anything else is something that I feel confidently that clients are really looking for. Not just a legal authority, but a human being to be able to truly take their hand and kind of guide them through this uncomfortable process.
Okay. Well, perfect. And I understand also that running a firm that spans the multiple practice areas can bring some additional complexity. So, how do you balance your growth while maintaining the consistency, trust, and the quality for your clients?
I think that's been paramount for me my entire career. And it's the vetting process, right? It's not every attorney and every client are a good fit. Not every fact pattern is a good fit for where I am in my practice and what I'm looking to bring on. So I think both being able to vet the client and the particular facts of this whatever matter is in front of me is critically important for long term, growth and success and ultimately I think managing the expectations of clients, I think kind of hand in hand with that initial vetting process. So I've always kind of just stayed true to that. If something doesn't feel right or if it just doesn't seem like a good fit, I usually stay away from it.
What is it that you enjoy most about your role today, whether that's advocating for clients, building the firm, or seeing the impact of the work of your work on people's lives?
I think ultimately seeing the impact of my work on people's lives is always been the goal. Unfortunately, I think for lawyers, sometimes when the legal work is done and the person moves on, we don't always necessarily hear from them unless there's problems later on. So I don't necessarily always get to see that. But again, it's not lost on me that whatever a client is presenting to me potentially is the worst thing they've ever gone through in their life. So again, it's not lost on me that they're at a very low point, and my guidance through that very dark time for them ultimately maybe kind of sets the tone as how they move forward, even after me, the lawyer, is kind of out of the picture.
All right. Well, great. And so actually, this next question is one of my favorite questions I always enjoy asking folks. So, are there any initiatives or changes you're currently focused on right now, whether that's any new practice areas, internal systems, client experience improvements, or operational upgrades that you'd like to share?
Yeah, we've actually started implementing some different accounting software to be able to maintain and manage our hourly billing, specifically with as it relates to family law. Over the past year or so, I'd say we've kind of implemented a few different software programs to help us manage our calendar. Like I said, accounting, client communications, so on and so forth. Kind of an ever evolving thing. There's always something new that you can implement, and that cost a fortune and may or may not actually work. So even that, you have to kind of vet that process and see what works, for you and your firm, me and my clients, and kind of try to avoid the things that are maybe for much larger firms or larger caseloads. It's all the software advancements and technologies that are not really one size fits all. Some things apply better to small solo practices like mine. Others are, built to scale for very large firms, which I am not.
Makes sense, and I definitely can relate to that. You know, we see that a lot of times with clients we work with, even for my own business. So I can definitely understand that area for sure. And one other thing I wanted to ask, because since you did mention you started doing more in family law, and I understand with the client trust being so central with that. So how do you currently think about protecting client information, case data, firm systems?
Yeah, I mean, we're always obviously anything a client tells me is confidential, and not even the United States Supreme Court could ever make me disclose anything that a client or even a potential client's ever said to me. Obviously, that includes emails, text messages, so on and so forth. So maintaining that confidentiality internally on our servers and whatnot, making sure this is as locked down and as watertight as we possibly can have it has always been a very vital part of, I believe, in attorneys' practice. You have to have your system secure to be able to maintain that confidentiality.
Yeah. So, have you taken a moment to step back and really assess where your technology and security setup to make sure it truly matches the level of trust that clients are placing in you today?
But yeah, definitely. And like I said, I feel like I'm not unique in this, but I feel like almost every week I'm being approached by someone or something new. And I usually have the thanks but no thanks approach, but I've kind of been listening, especially recently as my practice evolves and kind of moves into some other areas to see if there are different products out there that can work to also obviously make me more efficient, help my staff become more efficient, and ultimately save my clients money.
And one question I actually did want to ask, and I think it's a great segue because you just talked about efficiency. And, we've been hearing this in a lot of the conversations we've been having with other folks in the legal space. But what are your thoughts on AI? How it may help or hinder a law practice? And, is that something you've considered using or do you currently use within your practice?
Great question. I'm not a very tech savvy kind of guy, so I've always kind of tend to avoid that type of thing. But when I really stop to think about it, we've all used spell check our entire career, right? And in some way, shape, or form, that's a version of artificial intelligence. So obviously, it's an ever evolving thing. I went to a family law CLE back in the fall, and there was a section on artificial intelligence and how it applies to the law, and it was taught by an old lady, a college law professor, and I felt like before she said anything, she's probably going to be very anti AI, and was very interested to hear what she had to say. And she started this presentation by saying that she did not believe that AI would ever wholeheartedly replace attorneys, but that attorneys who use AI have already replaced attorneys who don't. And I thought that was a very interesting segue into this presentation of, how can it be implemented safely and effectively? Like I said, just like these software programs that I get presented often, it definitely has its advantages. It definitely has its weak points and exposure points. It's a tool in the tool belt. I think it's not a magic wand to say, hey, anybody can be a lawyer, and here's all the case law and so on and so forth. I have experimented with it. I've seen it be very helpful in terms of communication, which I think is a vitally important aspect of family law. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the issues in family law are breakdowns in communication, either between the two parties or even between the two attorneys. So I have seen its ability to kind of help navigate, hey, I want to say this, but I want to make sure I package this and deliver it a certain way versus just shooting from the hip and potentially making more conflicts where there don't need to be conflicts. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's an ever evolving thing that I'm always keeping an eye on and seeing if there's something, again, that can help me become better, more efficient, and ultimately have better results for my client and ultimately save them money.
No, I mean, it's great insights, and I would agree with a lot of what you said, especially when you went to that CLE and, they said, lawyers with AI will replace those without. I do believe that's true based on what I'm hearing from a lot of other folks. And actually, another lawyer had told me that even, and don't quote me on this exactly, but something about the Supreme Court saying that at some point, if you're not using it, could they consider you to do some sort of, malpractice or whatever. So I know there's even like those kinds of discussions going on, the fact that it can help with a lot of things. But I also do agree, and I've seen it for myself because I've also done a CLE, given a couple CLE courses last year, and trying to get it to properly cite items. That's probably the
Not
one
great.
area it constantly is flubbing.
Yeah, exactly. Hallucinations, right? I think it's called.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like as that evolution continues, it'll clearly get better. I started practicing in 2004, and by that point, there was Westlaw, LexisNexis. You can do all your legal research online. But I mean, if you backed up 10 years prior to the date that I started practicing, it was law libraries and it was books and, these super heavy, huge books that needed updating and replacing every single year. Just, in 2004, the advancement of computer research is almost kind of like what you're seeing today, right? Like, it's not to say that you couldn't find what you were looking for in a book, but it's a whole lot more efficient uh, finding it on a computer. And then I think as AI works its way into that conversation, I think it's just the next rung on the ladder.
No, I would definitely agree. Yeah, appreciate those insights. So I know as we are kind of coming towards the end here, just want to see if you had any final thoughts or any other thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience.
Uh, Nothing off the top of my head. I think, like I said, authenticity is important. I think as we become more, AI and computers and whatnot, I think there is a loss a little bit of, human authenticity and, being able to tell somebody again, me too, or I understand, I've been through it, been there, definitely goes a long way. I don't think just in terms of a legal practice, but, just in life itself. So be authentic when you can.
Well, Stephen, I really do appreciate you coming on. Some great insights. And for anyone who would like more information or would even like to reach out to Stephen, we'll have all the information below the video in the description.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.